Hello, hello. Not believe this is happening. Welcome to our, gosh, this is the last of our symposium, last panel, our symposium. We appreciate you sharing time with us for this screening, or for this talk. We would like to first, before we do anything, of course, acknowledge the land that we are on. We are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island. This is, so many histories are held in what we now call North America, but we would like to acknowledge the Alabama Cushata, the Caddo, the Carrizo Comecrudo, Bakwitecan, the Comanche, Kickapoo, the Lipan Apache, the Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and all of the American Indian and indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas, here in Austin, Texas. This panel is the last in our symposium of the Feminist Futures, Feminist Past that has been organized by the Center for the Women's and Gender Studies. We've had discussions all month long, bringing together voices in critical dialogue to think about and push discourses of race, of gender, of sexuality, of the archive and what we think about the archive, of allyship, of transnationalism, of legacy, of futurity, from so many different positionalities. Our goal really in the symposium was to think with an intersectional lens. So today, we are thinking really about how we claim histories, how we kind of reignite this beauty of resistance through Black feminist lineage. As you think about questions, as comments come up for you, please feel free to write those in the chat. We are really hoping that this is a living room conversation with Staceyann, with Fikile, and with Ania, to understand how young children show up in their work and how that aligns with Black feminism, how that shows up with Black feminism. So to you in the audience, we do have captions available. If you are on the bottom of your toolbar in the Zoom, you can click that. Of course, I've been talking a lot, but who am I? So I am Nxumalo Odom. I am one of the members of the planning committee for this symposium. So along with our director, Kristen Smith, our associate director, Sarah Nicholas, Brianna Barner, our social media extraordinaire, and Nancy Ewart. There's been tons of people behind the scenes that have helped to get this going. And so, gosh, today we are here, finally. This has been in my brain for years, y'all, years, from when I first started my doctoral study. We are here with three brilliant, brilliant thinkers. So my name is Nxumalo Odom, and I am a doctoral student in the early childhood education in the curriculum instruction, College of Education at University of Texas at Austin. And I came to this work because of Fikile Nxumalo. I came to Austin because of Fikile Nxumalo. So Fikile is faculty in the Department of Curriculum, Teaching and Learning at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto, where she directs the Childhood Place Pedagogy Lab. Fikile's scholarship focuses on reconceptualizing place-based and environmental education with current times of ecological precarity. Their scholarship is rooted in perspectives from indigenous knowledges, Black feminist geographies, and critical post-humanist theories. There's lots more that we are going to say about Fikile, but just to kind of give you a primer of everyone that's going to be in discussion today. And then Ania Freire is a documentary filmmaker and curator based in Kingston, Jamaica, whose practice centers on uplifting underrepresented voices. within grassroots communities. Their work really is grounded in the founding the Goat Curry Gallery and the documentary filmmaker behind Real Talk. So often using film, photography, and writing, Ania has been working as an artist, documenting stories and voices from remote communities across the island. Their work shines a light on everyday stories, oral histories, and folklore that are told by community members that may otherwise go unseen or unheard. So welcome, Ania. And then, of course, Staceyann Chin, poet, performer, activist, pens words of power that are raptured emotion. The author of the new poetry collection, Crossfire, A Litany for Survival. This is a critical acclaimed memoir, The Other Side of Paradise, co-writer and original performer in the Tony Award-winning Russell Simmons Deaf Poetry Jam on Broadway, and author of the one-woman shows Hands of Fire, Unspeakable Things, Border Clash, and Mother Struck. And of course, how I came to know Staceyann is through Zuri and the words of brilliance and position that she holds. So I'm thankful that all three of you were able to join this conversation today. And I wanted to make sure that if there's any opening words that Fikile, Ania, or Staceyann that you had that you wanted to say, you are welcome to share any opening words if you'd like as well.
Sorry, you go.
No, go ahead, Ania.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for providing this space and this platform and this conversation with all of you. I'm very, very honored to be here. So thank you.
Just echoing the same. I mean, how not? The brilliance is here. Like, I think that's part of why, I know Staceyann, I was mentioning a video that you shared a few weeks ago around the power in community. And when we stand up for each other, when we notice that each other are naming things, like how do we make sure we just give time and space to that? So how not, basically, is it in my body? How not? I see connections between the academy, between real life, and so it's been on my mind. And so I guess maybe I'll start with that. How this all happened. Kristen talked about us thinking about artists or just brilliance in the world around feminism. And I initially thought of Fikile because so much of your work names young children, relations around the historical precarity that we are living in, that responding to colonial dominance, and how do we name that in our work. And so that was on my mind, just how do we make sure young children are part of this conversation if we're talking about feminisms. And so knowing that, okay, Fikile is doing this, and then I saw that video, honestly, Staceyann, with you and Zuri, and it was Zuri, and we're gonna show that in a little bit. Zuri was just talking about, anxiety around turning older, like being older, and what does that mean? And the realities of a young child processing that is brilliant, and often that does not get talked about. And so knowing that you were making space for Zuri was something that I felt like was in conversation, that it felt like we were talking to Fikile in my mind. I was talking to both of you in my heart. And then Ania, was teaching, there is a brilliant Black revolutionary school in Austin called Kuakubwa. And I was teaching there, working with young children, just trying to understand their knowledges. And I saw the River Maiden video by Bobo in your gallery. And these are land relations. These are land relations that are in the islands that don't often get talked about. And you're documenting that. And so I wondered, I messaged you and I was like, Ania, do you think that I'm putting this in conversation with young children? Like, how would you feel about that? Are you okay with that? Do you have other thoughts on that? And then you send me these videos of young girls, 4 and 5 and 6, like just talking about their land relations and stories that they were told, and how they were holding knowledge, and you documented that over video. So the thread that I saw is that Fikile, you're writing about these knowledges that young children hold and relationships with land that they hold. Staceyann, that's in practice. That's in everyday life. When Zuri is sharing, you're making space for that. And Ania, same. You're making space across the world, and so that is part of how. You were in conversation in my head, your work is in conversation in my body. And so now you're on the Zoom screen together. So I'm thankful. So let's get started really around, I have been seeing Black feminism in your work, but that is really me inscribing something onto your work. And so I wondered about how you see, or where you see Black feminism coming up in your work. How did you kind of get there? So would you call yourself a feminist, a Black feminist? And if so, when did you come to call yourself this? Anyone can go first.
I've always been a feminist. I think I wasn't shy about the word feminist when I was a young reader, thinker, when I was a teenager, and I first heard the word when I was late teens, early 20s, as a young Black lesbian in Kingston. There was no hesitation about claiming the word. I think it was when I went to the United States and I kind of came of age as a Black lesbian radical writer, thinker in the heat of the late 90s to early 2000s. I think that issues of race and class and cultural and kind of neo-liberalism and imperialist thinking in New York and Europe, and traveling to Africa and hearing the women who were actually living feminist lives on the continent, they began to complicate the term for me. But I have always known I am a feminist. I have always claimed that I am a feminist. As much as I can, I lead Zuri towards the as a kind of public identifier as feminist, because what being a feminist means for me is working towards the rights and safety and protection of women and girls, that we would have the same shot at survival, at success as men within the context of the patriarchal system of governance that is global. And so I've always been a feminist. I know that inside of the world of feminism, there are systems set in place to reward white women more resoundingly than Black women, to affirm and award thin women more so than women who might have more curves, to affirm women who are quieter than women who are loud. And so I've always known that, but in Jamaica, I have to fight for the right to be a lesbian who is free and safe and able to be loud and take up as much space as heterosexual women and, goddamn it, heterosexual men. And I know that when I'm in the US, I have to think about my child's safety, even with the state power of the police force at hand, the judicial system. I mean, all of that to say, yeah, I'm a feminist, but being a feminist inside of the feminist world don't mean that racism and classism and all that shit still doesn't exist full force, and we have to fight it. So being a feminist means that I can be sisters with a white woman in struggle, but I already know that she's going to be taken care of by the system more so than I. And so I have to call her out on the shit when she starts weeping and talking to me about like, you know, women's rights outside of the context of, you know, rights for Black and brown people, rights for disabled people, rights for people who don't live in America or Europe.
I think for me, it's something that has taken me a while to kind of, and I still am only just now sort of becoming comfortable and not feeling sort of so intimidated by the label, just because I don't come from, you know, like an academic sort of knowledge and understanding. But when I think about my childhood in Australia and growing up with this very like strong and fiercely independent nomadic artist mother who like took me out of school when I was 10, and we traveled around Australia in the car for a year, and, you know, just like lived in swags that she handmade and had these like crazy sort of adventures. My whole childhood, I can see that I was really like living a very physical lived experience with a mother who was, you know, giving me these very sort of feminist embodiment of the world. And then coming to Jamaica and discovering my Black Jamaican ancestry, and I came here in 2016, and I came by myself, just wanting to sort of get an idea and a feel of the land and move around and sort of deepen my own art practice. And after being here for like a couple of months, I just realized that I needed to stay. And I was living in this rural community in Westmoreland. And I think the community, when I said, oh, I'm staying, I'm not taking my return ticket, I'm staying in Jamaica, there was this fear of like, you're not gonna survive, you know, the way that you embody the world, the way that you are, like, you need to start observing. I was actually told, like, you need to start observing women and the way that they are in the world here, basically. And so then this new layer of like embodiment in terms of like, I specifically remember being told the way I hold myself, like I walk too fast, I speak too much, I am not, you know, make eye contact but not for too long, and don't share too much information about yourself, but slow down and have a presence and have a kind of, you know, a way that you move in the world that is strong, but then at the same time it was kind of like, but keep quiet, because you can't be this, you know, you can't share too much, it's dangerous. And this was all coming from this sense of danger that was completely new to me and was something that I needed to kind of understand now in this new space. And then my grandmother, who grew up in rural St. Mary, and, you know, during the colonial time, she moved to Kingston and was working as a domestic worker, and then had an opportunity to go to the UK. And so since I've been living now for 5 years in Jamaica, she's come back a few times. And then there's this like layer of understanding that I'm receiving through spending time with her and getting to know her, because I didn't grow up with her. And the way that she experiences the world as a dark-skinned woman here in Jamaica, and the way that I experience the world, and the way that space is created for both of us in very different ways. And spending time with her, going shopping, doing things, and seeing that and feeling that through her. And then also, you know, just added that whole, seeing the way that the justice system in this country just continually fails women, and, you know, violence and rape and murder is just kind of turned into a type of voyeurism and a spectacle. And I suppose these new kind of embodiments and understanding like why I needed to sort of shift the way I was in, to accommodate being here, or just to kind of, I don't know, survive first and foremost, and then maybe like create a new or shift a space for myself. But these first 5 years is just kind of like, I need to get my head around this reality, and that's kind of given me a sort of a more complex understanding, which I would never ever have gotten living in Australia or in the UK. or probably in the States, like being here has kind of really enriched that for me.
I would say that I align with Black feminist thought in its many multiplicities, particularly in the ways that it allows me to center Black children's lives in really in affirmative and relational ways, including considerations of the ways in which age, Blackness, and gender come to matter in young children's everyday world making. And I don't recall a specific first time of calling myself a Black feminist, but that Black feminist work has for a long time really helped me to make sense not only of my own lived experiences, but my children.
Rain shower. Aí é muito engraçado, porque de repente vem assim, dá uma chuveirada, aí daqui a pouco para. Parece que...
Go ahead.
Lived experiences of children, including my own children, in relation to oppressive conditions of anti-Blackness and heteropatriarchy, but also in relation to liberatory imaginaries. So for instance, Black feminist work provided me with the tools, for instance, to make sense of why discourses of Disney, in particular the hyper-feminized and white characters, were so desirable to my children when they were preschoolers. And more recently, Black feminist work on futurity and refusal has really been helpful for me in subverting anti-Black formations in early childhood education, research and practice, and has really deeply informed my storying of Black children's relations with the more than human world. And so in my work, I found that rather than thinking about identity in static ways, Black feminisms have really helped me to think about Black children's subjectivities in really situated, generative, and dynamic ways.
Yeah, there's so much that you were saying about holding it in your, like how you hold power in your body. Like Ania, when you're talking about how you're supposed to stand and in order to illustrate power, but not too much, or like trying to negotiate how you hold that in your body, and that and how that comes to matter for other people. And Staceyann, we were talking about just the ways that infrastructures impose boundaries, and then how we push back on that. And I think about my mom and my family in the way that feminism wasn't a name. It was a thing that you had to do because you wanted to survive. You want to thrive, you want to be happy, you want to support your family. And so it's just the task that you take on in order to do those things. And then it's been called feminism, or then it's called something by, it's labeled something. And so what I hear in a lot of what you're all saying is that it is a way that we kind of hold our power, really, our just desire to live without boundaries.
I have a question for Fikile. Are we saying that correctly?
Fikile.
Fikile. So I was quite, my brain just kind of did its own backflip while you were talking. And one of the issues I think that continues to remain pertinent is you talked about Disney, and my own kid had two choices when she was quite young, and fucking Elsa was the go-to character for all the girls. She could watch it and have difficult conversations with me about it, or she could not watch it. Those were the choices that were available to her. But there was no, you could just go watch it with your friends and we wouldn't talk about it, or we wouldn't have hard conversations that you would find uncomfortable. And I'm watching her now, she's 9. I don't know how old your children are, but mine is 9 and is watching a lot of, like Full House and a lot of the stuff that is kind of supposedly for her age group. Her friends are watching. I mean, she was into Descendants for one moment. And then she was into, she draws anime quite a bit. She's into like very deeply entrenched in drawing. And so how is it, you laid it out so clearly and so beautifully and so succinctly just now. Your umbrella theoretics just now moved me deeply. And so I want to I want to ask how it is that you deal with these kinds of conversations. I know you understand why they prefer and you understand how they move through it, but what are the conversations you have with your own children about why it is that their interactions with you around these supposedly fun shows are perhaps more meaty than they would have with their friends' parents?
Thank you. That's a great challenging question. So my children are grown now. So this was when they were much younger. They're now in high school and college. And I would say that those were difficult and challenging conversations because often my attempts at kind of disrupting those discourses were often met with skepticism from my children because they were so immersed in that world of Disney and the desirability of Disney. I remember one of my first writings actually was around my young daughter who had drawn herself as Rapunzel. So as, you know, blonde, blue-eyed Rapunzel. And some of the challenging conversations that emerged from that, including sharing with her a story of Black Rapunzel that was met with some skepticism. So I would say I don't have kind of one way of engaging with those conversations. I've tried different things over the years, but I found it to be really hard because of how dominant those discourses are and how desirable when they are when children are very young.
Mm-hmm. You know, I find it to be challenging even now. And I mean, Zuri knows the script. I mean, she's been hearing it since birth. So she'll come back and she'll draw and I peek over her shoulder and she's like, I'm just practicing this white hair thing. The next character is going to be Black, you know, but she kind of knows that representation for herself is important, people who look like her. But it's still like the majority of what she engages is still very much, you know, the white phenotype. And I feel like I'm the non-fun parent when it comes to these things. You know, I'll watch a movie that everybody's, oh my God, and I'm like, why is there only one Black character? And why is she so unlikable? And why is she not as strong as the rest of the characters or whatever? I mean, I don't know what Ania's experience was growing up in Australia. I mean, I know from my own experiences there that the Aboriginal community certainly experiences some of the same things we're talking about, you know, growing up a minority in the US or, you know, even here where we're not minority, but much of what is available to us is white.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the first time I went to the first time I met my father was when I was about 14, and we went to the UK and I met him. But I remember riding on the tube and seeing a mixed race woman, like an elderly woman, and it just blew my mind because I was like, oh, maybe that's what I will look like when I'm old. I'd never seen any kind of representation of an older version of myself. Like a lot of, like I think how I grew up, a lot of my mum's friends and the children around was very multicultural, which again was a kind of a bubble that she kept me in a very white space. But going to the UK completely blew my mind. And then later going to the US, and I remember being in like a hair store that was just like had a whole aisle of products for Black hair. And I was just like, it was the most crazy experience for me. Like, it was really like, wow, there's not just one little thing, like there's a whole aisle. And then, but that was also interesting because I did spend a lot of time, like when I was saying I was out of school and traveling with mum, and a lot of her work and her art practice took us to a lot of remote Indigenous communities around Australia. And so I was put into different schools and bounced around. And again, it was like, you know, just difference. Everything's different. Because again, you know, I'm coming into a school where maybe there's like 3 different families and it's a very tight-knit community, and I'm who am I, like, and where do I belong, and who's this white mother of yours? But then if I'm in, you know, other spaces in Australia, again, it's that same, oh, until I say I have, you know, Jamaican, and then it's like, okay, we can place you. But yeah, like definitely feeling very sort of isolated in my experience growing up in those spaces, which is why I'm here, and which is why I love it, and which is why I wish I came like earlier, and like every day I pinch myself and I'm just like, I'm so happy to be living in a country that is mostly Black and brown. And yes, there are so many issues, so many issues, but just that kind of visual experience moving through the city and through my day, and seeing people, you know, in positions of power. And I mean, I remember like a friend reaching out because there was something I posted with a film crew, and you know, all of the heads of department, they're all Black, and this was a friend in the UK, just like, oh wow, like isn't that amazing? And I was like, hadn't even, like, I've been here for long enough that it didn't even feel, you know, it's just normal. That's just normal, and it's nice. It's very nice.
Ania, I feel like that is, so my dad is Nigerian, and majority of my family are Igbo, are in Aberba, like the west of the US, and my mom is from the Bahamas, and all of her family are still on the island. And when I was 4, we went back every single year. And so that when you're talking about seeing the people that you run into every single day are, you know, mahogany skin, are chestnut skin people who are helping you in the grocery store, who are your pediatrician, who are your prime minister, who are just throughout the day. I don't know that it stood out to me. And then I also grew up in Chicago in the US, and noticing that in school, you know, I was the only Black girl that was in the school. So then had questions about, you know, hair and where my parents are from, and why do I leave school so many times to go to family? So I think having it be that there wasn't a constant, that I had Black leaders when I went to the islands, but I had, you know, overwhelmingly white leaders and white teachers when I was in the US, made me think that it was not so much question that leadership can be Black, but knowing that there is this system, like starting to realize that there was an infrastructure created to funnel resources to somebody, I think is something that I remember couldn't put words to earlier on. And my mom never actually talked to me about that. So Staceyann, when you're saying like you would sit with Zuri and you talk about the images that she's seeing, it was more of just trying to figure out what is going on? Why is this going on? And I think it's part of what leads to my wanting to, like, my curiosity now as a, you know, 35-year-old woman, is that I don't understand it still. So when you talk about representation, I feel like I had a lot of representation in my everyday life, and still there's so much curiosity around these infrastructures that come out. So when Zuri's talking about like, yes, I know, I'm gonna try out this color hair right now. I'm just trying out this color hair right now. I feel that. I feel that just because there's so many questions that still stand, even with
I'm sitting like square in the center of the storm of deciding whether we go back to the US right away. We've been here for 3.5 months, or whether we stay another year. I mean, we really literally left New York for a 2-week respite from the lockdown in the middle of winter for COVID. So we came here in the middle of January just for a 2-week, and 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, turned into 6 weeks. Now we are into 4 months almost. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, I'm listening to Ania say, oh, I wish I'd come earlier. And I'm listening to, just listening to the stories that, you know, reference representation and what you're surrounded by. And I'm watching this kid, you know, in a lot of ways, stretch out and enjoy Jamaica, kind of try on the language, but also miss New York. I mean, she's been in New York her whole life, and we just bought a house last year. So we've been living in apartments, and then we got this house with a backyard with a dog. I mean, a lot of it was very good for a kid. And just kind of struggling with the question of, you know, what is best and what things weigh more, because here there's no real big space for girls, you know, I mean, or for girls who do it differently, you know, like Zuri wears an afro quite a bit, and lots of people, I mean, I thought New York was bad with just people saying stuff to her about her hair, but here people are like, oh, she should comb her hair. What's wrong? You should comb her hair here. Or God forbid, one day we should get her hair done. And then everybody is like orgasmic all day about her hair, about how great it is, about how wonderful it is that it's done, rather than left wild. And then all the ideas around, like, you know, it's a very, like, I don't know if any of you ever had that struggle or is struggling with it. I mean, back to you again, Fikile, because you're the other, you know, parent person who talks about this in the group. I don't know, I'm, you know, I'm struggling with it, and I haven't come to any kind of bold answer, but here we are still in Jamaica.
I mean, even though I wish that I came here earlier, I also then quickly really appreciated that I came here when I did, with the tools and the experiences that I had. And I mean, I'm so incredibly grateful for the freedom that I had in terms of like taking up space and being able to move in a way that I didn't have to be so hyper vigilant all of the time. So as a child and as a teenager, you know, into my 20s, like all of that time, I was 30 when I got here. So, and then, you know, I'm here, but I'm here also because I feel this like just need and responsibility to kind of be creating space for that disrupts and kind of promotes like a softness and a gentleness and kind of giving space to this like this gentle layer that exists underneath this crust, which is just very violent and traumatic. So it does feel like work, and it does feel like purpose work. It's not like being here is in any way just this sort of like relaxing, lovely life, island life. And I see people coming, and especially young women coming, and then a few months in, it's, you know, unless you are coming with a purpose and coming with work that you feel very strongly about, they need to go. Like they end up going, as in they themselves kind of acknowledge that I can't be here at this point. So it's interesting that sort of the idea of like, and I wonder with myself, like, would I raise children here in Jamaica? Like what would that look like? And I think the fact that New York is so close, like I spent 1 year that I was here, I spent, you know, every 3 months I would go up to New York. I would look after a friend's dog, and so it was this perfect opportunity to like go up to New York and then stay for a couple of weeks and then come back again. And you know, having that privileged position to be able to move in and out and kind of recharge and then come back with new energy and having made new relationships and new conversations outside of Jamaica, and then continuing to sort of breathe new life, because Jamaica will suck your energy dry, unfortunately. But at the same time, I'm such an advocate for like people coming back and bringing energy. It's just how you preserve that energy and how you continue to, like, at the moment you start to resent and get frustrated and angry, like you need to check yourself and kind of step away or something, because there's no space to kind of keep doing that here. for me anyway, I feel like there's this responsibility of if you
I want to push back.
go on.
I want to push back and say that there are too many amazing, creative, wonderful humans here who are doing that work and are rejuvenating and generating work here. I think I've said that to you before in another conversation, that they are here. You just have to figure out who they are. I get a little bit like nervous when those of us who don't live and work here on the ground, you know, and don't have access to everything that's here. And I still think you don't have access to everything because you haven't stretched, you know, I don't know, you haven't stretched all your tentacles deeply out and in all the spaces in Jamaica. But there's like real big thriving communities, queer communities here, feminist communities here. And not because you and I don't have access to them in the same way, or we aren't let in the same way yet, but they're here and they're wonderful. I would love to hear from if there are local Jamaicans in the chat. I can see the little yeses coming up, but it's nice. I know we are all Zoom and we're not in the room, so we can't see people's responses, but I would love for people to start chiming in the chat with little comments about what we say, because I stand very clearly in the knowledge that I ain't no shit. You know, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm like, you know, asking questions, and maybe this is where the people who on the panel have the better you know, the better deal in that, you know, we get to kind of air all of our worries and try out ideas on the audience, and kind of come to some kind of clearer conclusion about what we think or what we feel. That's one of the things that I miss most about being in person. You know, I can see Fikile's tending to be on the quieter side in the panel, but I would love to grab you afterwards and, you know, over a cup of very bad conference tea and ask you, like, what were you really thinking up there that you ain't say yet because you're not the kind of person saying shit in public out of your mouth? That's the conversation I want to have with you.
But I definitely, Staceyann, I definitely 100% agree with you, and I don't think that I definitely do agree that there are so many.
I think they're here, Ania. You just don't know them yet, and maybe I've aged out of some of the groups, but they're here, like young, fucking like.
No, I don't deny that they're here. They're here.
They're making noise. They like doing all kinds of like activist work. They're meeting in parliament. They're here. We just have to find them, and you have to find them. But they're here, and so but everywhere was the part that got me was when you said Jamaica will suck your energy dry. But everywhere, New York sucked me dry, which is why I'm in Jamaica trying to drink up some of it.
Yeah. Fair enough. 100%.
Another thing that comes up too, Staceyann, as you were talking about just hair, is like, I remember there was a video of Zuri and she was just excited about her hair, and the way that so often we can't just be, that it ends up having to be like a movement, or it has to be a statement, that it's like, some days I just want to get my hair done and feel cute and not have to worry about how that is represented or how that is responded to. And that is, so I wonder about how, like, if there's people who have thoughts on that it's like, why does it feel like so often as Black girls, as Black women, that often it is a statement that we are making with our hair or the clothes or whatever, and why can it not just be, I'm getting my hair done because I want to feel cute, and I because Black girls can't just be cute. We must be like, oh, she grown, or oh, her booty's too big, or oh, she not shaped the right way, or she being loud. Like, you know, a Black girl in the same little teeny weeny shorts that I see white girls in, like, it's a whole different conversation. Locally, culturally, like, you know, from the outside gaze, I see them in the same, can I say fuck? I see them in the same fucking shorts. Same shorts in Zuri school. Zuri goes to a predominantly white school in New York City, and they all wear these teeny weeny shorts that I can like
essentially see their underwear going in school, teenagers. But if a Black girl wears it, it's a different conversation because she's got a different body. So the different body means that she's only allowed, and then she's got different hair and she's got different skin. I mean, I had that fight in preschool with Zuri when they were like insisting that for ballet, she's got to wear pink tights. And I was like, no, let's break down this pink tights and this pink flesh that it should match. Why should my child be mandated to wear some pink tights? No, if you want her to match her flesh, let's get some tan tights, some brown tights. Let's get tights that fit her skin. Or if we're not gonna bother with the skin, let her fucking be like all black and wear some red tights.
Yeah, like why is that is actually, I'm gonna show a video because Ania captured some of this. I feel like just the effervescence that a Black girl just wants to be and tell you a story, and that is all. Like we don't always, well, let me show you the video and then let's talk about what you think about this video. So
Fikile should tell us more. I believe that there's a whole bunch of knowledge that's sitting over there not saying much. I want it.
I know. Yeah. So Fikile, we'll have the video and then we'll see what you think about this. Just the words that she's saying. All right.
Have you ever heard about River Mama?
Yes.
Have you ever heard about River Mama?
Yes.
What have you heard?
One night a lady passed through the blue hole and he heard the mermaid. She heard the mermaid go in the water and flash in the water and go back.
Really?
Yeah.
What have you heard?
One night I go down to my river and I was going to bathe. When I was going to reach down there, I saw a mermaid on the rock stone. And when she saw me, she jumped off.
You saw one?
Yes.
Wow. What did she look like?
Half human and half fish. I see a mermaid was singing on the rock stone. And she was combing her hair.
You saw one sitting on the rock combing her hair?
Yeah. And singing. And she was singing while she was singing while she was brushing her hair.
The mermaid, is she friendly?
No.
No? Tell me.
She's wicked. She's bad.
Why is she bad?
Because she is evil. She red and she evil. And she a Rasta. I see a mermaid that's wicked and she a Rasta here. And
How do you know she was wicked?
Because when she's singing, the whole community can hear it. If you want to see a mermaid go in the night, 12 o'clock, round up the blue hole, you see mermaid singing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. In this, Ania and I were talking about how they just had a story to tell. They can chew their gum. They can talk to you in whatever way they want. They can lean on each other to tell the story. There's just a comfort in how they were talking with each other that is the effervescence of young girls, that we can talk about what we think is wicked, what we think is good, and it's not that they're in conflict with each other, that they just are, that these are just the realities that we want to tell you. And it's not because we're trying to make a statement. And so I sit with that video, I sit with lots of Zuri's videos around how young girls just, we want to share our knowledge, our brilliance with you, and that's it. And so, that sits on my mind as Black feminism too, as a way to hold our power, that we can just say what we are feeling, and it's not because we're trying to make a statement. It is because we are thinking and we want to say it. And so I see that in a lot of your work too, but Fikile, I wanted to just get your thoughts. Staceyann has been calling for your words, calling for your voice. We all want to hear what is coming up for you as you have been thinking about the conversation.
Well, I love the video, and I think it resonates a lot with my own work around just listening to young Black children and attending to their ways of being in the world without trying to fit it into some normative developmental assessment or trajectory, without comparing them to other children, and just listening to the brilliance of young Black children. I think it's so important. And there's many lessons for early childhood education, which is steeped in deficit ways of thinking about young Black children. And so I think there's a lot of pedagogy just in that moment that early childhood educators can learn from about listening to young Black children.
I just wanted to say, like, what was really striking for me was, because I don't normally, I feel very cautious about turning my camera on to kids, and a lot of my work has actually been mostly focused on adults. And these two, Shawnee and Lavi, they just sort of, they asked me to record them, and I'd already packed up my camera, and so I used my phone. And that invitation was very important, that they were like, you know, well, we want to tell you about our experience after hearing me talking to, doing interviews with other people. And the story, like I'd never heard about the mermaids singing. It's so loud that the whole community can hear, and like Rasta locks. Like, so these details, as they're telling this fluidity, they're going back and forth, and then the story is growing, and they're adding these new things in, but then solidifying them also into like, then this is the story, you know. Shawnee adds that she's singing, and so then Lavi's like, yeah, so she's singing, and this happened, and da-da-da. And I was just like, wow, like this is where the stories are being made, you know, because the adults that I'm interviewing and feeling this need to like preserve like time sensitive knowledge are recalling memories from their childhood. You know, they're recalling an incident or a sighting or some experience that happened for them as a child, and then suddenly I'm just like, but these are the people who are creating and maintaining and like enriching that knowledge now, real time. And I was like, this has changed the way that I want to approach like the storytelling around River Mama that I'm doing here. Yeah, with that, just how quickly the story kind of grows, and they're both just supporting each other in that back and forth of, yep, she was doing this, yep, she was doing that, yep, this is who she is, and that's it. Facts. Whereas adults are so much more timid, you know, with, oh, I'm not sure, and I heard this, and I don't know. But, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. As a writer and a memoirist, where I feel like history is just another way of telling different perspectives of the same happening. I'm listening to these kids in this piece that Ania made or captured, and just thinking that you're right in saying this is where the story is happening, but this is where history is also being created. This is where, you know, this is where stories become facts, you know, whether they were in fact or not. When you allow kids to be a part of the stories told, one, and two, to claim it and kind of chart it, you know, because throughout history, much of what happens is really, we are unable to capture everything that happened. And so we all have to make calls about what is included and what is reified and what is, discarded. And just watching those kids deciding in the moment, it's a wonderful illustration of how, the story of Christopher Columbus can become a story of this hero who discovered an entirely new place, or a villain who rolled up on a bunch of people and took what was theirs. I mean, that's exactly how the difference in that story is created. Because one group of people were allowed to speak and the others weren't.
And in that way, this is the archive. I know in Wednesday's talk with Kristen, and we were talking about Beatrice and archiving the stories that we are telling each other. How are we doing that? And in that way, I see a thread between all of your work, like Ania documenting, Staceyann documenting through poetry, that we are the archives. We're keeping so much of these stories, whether it be in the moment that we are deciding, watching them, where they're creating the story together, is a part of the archive. So as you think about that, how do you, and even the video with Dorcas and Phoenix that you shared, Staceyann, that's part of the archive, where we're shielding each other and we are protecting the archives that we do have. So as you think about that, how do you see your work adding to the archive or burning the archive? Or how do you see your work, how do you hope your work impacts or influences what we are telling each other now? What kind of stories we're telling each other now?
Well, I started writing primarily because I didn't see a Black lesbian from Jamaica in the archives. In the canon of literature, I was a student of literature and loved reading it, and read Shakespeare and, all of, Toni Morrison, and Toni Morrison is important, wonderful, requisite reading for every Black girl in the world. But Toni Morrison is also an American voice, which, I spend most of my time, whenever I've made a pact to myself that, generally speaking, when I'm outside of the US, I must read authors who are Black authors who are outside of the US too, and who are from outside of the US, because so much of the material that I'm reading is US based, even as I choose it to be Black or lesbian or radical feminist thought, or, so much of it is based out of the US that we can, in leaning into the Black experience or the Black feminist experience, we can lean further into the imperialist experience if we aren't careful. So I've been reading a lot of the authors that I wouldn't necessarily have access to, or I wouldn't necessarily be making time for, or wouldn't even come across my purview. So now when I'm in Jamaica, I'll say to my Jamaican friend, "What's on your library? What's in your library? What's on your shelf? What are you reading now? What reading did you go to here that you think I have to read?" And that's a way of holding my American identity accountable to an anti-imperialist lens.
Yeah, there's a lot in the chat. I think that's something, Fikile, that I know we've talked a lot about, pulling from artists from West Africa, pulling from the Caribbean, pulling from Africa, all over. There's such different distinctions in how Blackness can be held, how Black feminism can be held, how just feminisms in general can be held through the Black experience, that is not always written, is not always captured in the ways that, that in the written word. So yeah, Staceyann, listening to what other artists and scholars are people pulling from, because it does lean in a direction.
I forget the name of the author, but I just read a book called The Barefoot Woman. It's about the Hutu and the Tutsi divide, and it's the one memoir that I've read of a woman who was a girl during that war, and her mom died in the war, and so it's really just a very short account of her mother's medicinal practices, you know, like which herbs she used for which thing, what root was good for that, and you know how her mother worried about their safety and what she did to try to plan for an escape for her children, and that she didn't make it. But it was just beautiful, you know. And I'm currently in the middle of reading Ways of Dying by Zakis Nda from South Africa. I just read A Girl is a Body of Water before that. Like tons of shit. I mean, I'll probably put something on the Instagram feed for those listening today, but it's very, very easy. You could just like, you know, hit up your friend who's from Nigeria and be like, yo, what's your cousin reading in Nigeria right now? There's lots of shit that you could just have access to and read.
Mm-hmm. That is a piece of what just for me, because of young children, is kind of where I feel invigorated, looking at just books by authors from all over the world. So Auntie Luce's Talking Paintings is one lately that I am just adoring, because it calls out histories, Haitian revolutionaries. So it kind of, while talking to young children and knowing that they have these knowledges, acknowledges that the histories that we do know have been skewed. There are certain historians that are telling us these histories. And so how do we make sure we include our grandparents' histories, our great-grandparents' histories, and how they experienced, you know, resistance to colonization. So yes, Staceyann, please share. And Ania, if y'all have other suggestions of readings that you are following, or like what is giving you life as you think about what you're adding to the archive, how you're thinking about the archive.
Yeah, I mean, my kid is reading like anything Anansi right now, like all the Anansi stories, like Anansi Mekit, and she's like reading, lots of it is in Patois, and she's reading it aloud with me, and we're doing it paragraph by paragraph. We also have like a big, you know, a slab of books from Black women poets that we've been reading. I mean, a lot of it is Nikki Giovanni, but a lot of it is a bunch of other authors from the rest of the world. I just feel like we should just like, you know, somebody in the chat is saying, do Google Doc going that everyone can kind of share. I think that's a great idea. But I think that, you know, the more, you know, we're readers. I mean, we can definitely be more global in our, one of the things that I'm really struggling with being on the island just now of Jamaica is how much of my like feminist experience happens in the American context. Like, even as I'm the American voice that is pushing back at the other Americans saying, yo, we gotta include other voices. Now that I'm not in America and I'm here and I'm like just experiencing the conversations that are happening here, the conversations around queerness, the conversations around, you know, girlhood, the conversation around survival, it's completely different. It's like a whole different conversation happening in the US, which is only happening within the context of, you know, American lives, which, you know, is a small part of the global life of a Black girl. You know, they're Black girls, they're like, I don't know how many times more Black girls on the continent than there are in America and in the Caribbean. It's like and they're doing shit. They're like making up shit. They're writing, they're singing, they're making films. We need to pay attention to them, I think. You know, I'm feeling a little bit like I'm being, you know, snarky at the American voices right now, but like Americans take up too much space, I feel. And I feel it in my knowledge base when I'm here, and I'm like, oh, I have to be making adjustments because I'm learning all this shit that is, you know, pertinent to other people on the planet who are Black and amazing and Black girl magic, just like the Black girls in America.
Yes, yes. And I'm looking at the participant list and I see that we have a lot of people that are from outside of the US. And so if people do want to kind of chime in with questions that they have around how they're doing that, how are we kind of shifting the lens so that when we're having conversations around young children and Black feminism, that it is more of a global perspective rather than just more of a global perspective, not even a rather than. And so as you have suggestions, we will create a Google Doc. Kristen, thank you for the suggestion. So we can all add some of our suggestions. All right, and so I want to open it up first to Fikile and Ania. I know that Staceyann, you've been asking them questions. If there are questions that you have for each other that you can ask, and then we'll open it up to participants, to any attendees who have questions that they'd like to ask Fikile, Ania, or Staceyann.
What are you working on now, Ania?
Me now? Oh, wow. So many things. I mean, I'm deepening the River Maid stories that I've been collecting since I've got here since I got here 5 years ago. But I mean, like, so my work is really like, it is a reflection of my movements and my everyday and how like the conversations that I'm having on a sort of very everyday basis. So recently I've been working with craft artists, so I'm continuing that work. The real talk stories that I was documenting led me to start featuring craft artists who kind of exist outside of mainstream knowledge. And like this, for example, is a piece of work from an artist in Portland, and he uses lighters and rum bottle caps. So he's like doing this upcycling, making these curtains. And there's some other artists like around the island, the ceramicist, a man who works with bamboo, a woman who weaves, a crochet woman. And so kind of finding ways to feature their work on different platforms and engage people, and also like putting on exhibitions and ways to engage people with their work more. The River Mama stories is something that it's just like, I just feel like it's going to be something that over years and years will grow and take its own shape and form. And like, I love not having and not putting any time restrictions on myself in terms of being here, in terms of work, and just taking so much time, because that is the only way that I feel comfortable to sort of be in a space where I am representing voices. Otherwise, you know, there's just, I feel like, and I feel like people also appreciate that there is so much of this movement of coming in and coming out and dropping in and dropping out. So just being very still here and kind of getting to know different areas and different spaces, and then building on relationships. So revisiting people who I've recorded stories with, and kind of finding ways to collaborate with them in different ways. Poets, artists, people who, again, it's always for me, it's like, I just feel like there's so many voices and so many experiences that really live outside of like what the chatter and the mainstream kind of noise in Jamaica. And so even, I think, like, I'm like, even when you were saying, you know, there's so much going on, and I completely agree with you in that respect. But I suppose for me, it's like stories and moments and experiences which really live outside of like what is happening on the ground, because there is so much happening on the ground. Like, even just COVID has kind of, Kingston is a completely different place. It's because it's just buzzing happening. Everyone's doing something, which is incredible. But then there's a lot, huge amounts of voices and experiences which just, for me, are really kind of cut off. And so, yeah, it's kind of kind of what I'm doing, how I'm moving at the moment.
Ania, as you were talking, it makes me think about Stacy and how we were saying, oh, you know, the authors that we're pulling from are, we want to be more global, but just you naming Being Still, it made me think about like the way that even the thinking, the methods. So yes, we might be pulling from a more global orientation of authors or artists, but like the methods, are they more of a global method? Are they thinking about being still, thinking about relations with land, thinking about relations with people? Or is it more of like, sometimes time, you only have you have a couple of weeks to get something done. And that feels really Western, that feels really US, like to speed through listening to stories, speed through trying to hear Black girls. And so in what ways are we not only thinking about authors and artists who are writing from a global perspective, but what about the methods that are global? Like, I don't know if that was everything that was in my head, but you know what I mean?
As the pandemic in the US slows a bit, and you know, I hear New York in July will be completely open for business, because now everyone who can get the vaccine can get it. You know, everyone who wants to get the vaccine can now get it. And I think having had a year of being still, speaking of being still and calling into being the conversation around being still, there is a way I feel like family life and friendships and relationships that weren't friendships before have benefited from this kind of local stilling, where people can be jumping on a plane, going here, jumping there. And so the consideration to move or to run or to flee or to exit or to, you know, cut off people from connection has to be more deeply considered now. So, you know, you've had to like hunker down for a year or more with the same group of people. And there was much I liked about that. I live a very New York life where you see people, I saw people all the time, but it was different people all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily see the same people regularly or frequently. But now that I had to, and certainly now that I'm sitting still in Jamaica in one place, there's something to be said about having a responsibility to a small group of people, and the responsibility need not be the one you were kind of handed at birth, but the one that you choose and the one that you decide to remain accountable to the same group of people, because you can't be outside, you know, having willy-nilly interactions with new people and then just bringing it back to the group and be like, yeah, that happened. No, you have to be, you know, there's a kind of understanding that what you do, I'm privy to it, and how you do it, I'm considered inside of it. That I like, where it has pulled us into a kind of community notion of who we are. The community has to be considered now. The community has to be a part of the lens through which we use to, you know, to see the bigger parts of ourselves, to name ourselves, to identify ourselves, to categorize ourselves. Am I a person living with a person who has a comorbidity, or a person who is vaccinated or not vaccinated? I like that consideration, and you know, it has forced people to have deeper relationships with the people around them, and I like that. It has certainly forced me to do that. You know, even if it was uncomfortable. You know, audience members, I don't know who's out there. I can't see the list of people in the chat, but do you have questions for us? We would be happy to take your questions, or we could ask you questions and you could answer. You know, have there been questions in the chat?
Okay. Hi, it's Marianne here. You're speaking a little globally, but it was very interesting for me, more like what you were talking about, who you live with. And I was very lucky to live with two artists. And when we were absolutely shut down, all three of us, even though their ages are very different, became very, it was amazing the growth that happened with my 18-year-old son, myself who is 60, and my husband who's 50, writer, digital artist, and physical artist. And that the depth of communication that started developing, because they were our studio mates now. They weren't children, we weren't parents. We were the only studio mates in our creative process to share. And it was really, as far as the young and education aspect of developing independence and self-direction, it was remarkable. And so I don't know if anybody, and I've been trying to find these stories, because you're hearing the more negative stories about that versus the positive stories of, we have a high school here where a lot of kids were left out, and having the online learning let them thrive, because now they weren't dealing with all the conflict. They were doing what they did well, and they found other resources that weren't traditional education. So they really grew. And now they have a bigger handle of how to go back to a very traditional school setting, where they're creative in their untraditional way. They now can speak of it very clearly and give. Anyway, that's something I've really noticed and had really deep. I don't know how to mimic that once this changes either, because that's part of, I'm a self-directed education person, that I support people that do that. And so it's interesting how people came to me and were like, oh my God, you've been doing this with your kid. How do you do it? And I'm like, it's a lot of you unlearning. It's a lot of the adults stopping their old models and letting the youth become what their new vision is. And so there was, being artists, it was easy to do that. I don't know how many traditional parents could stop forcing the tradition on their children, meaning public school here, sorry, public education, and letting the children develop. And so it was just this, anyway, it was a very deep, and was starting to model, and I hope to support those kids with just positive reinforcement around that.
Mm-hmm. And Marianne, what I hear too, you're talking about is like, how do we translate what we are picking up during this time into when we're shifting back, I guess. I don't, so I guess I will, that, Staceyann, I see you unmuting. You have something to say.
I was just about to officially raise my hand, and then I saw that Jennifer in the chat also asked a question very similar to what I was about to pose. I find it, I have very young children, so I find it really funny to hear people talk about this as a year of stillness, because for me, this was a year of chaos. They're 5 and 3, and so it was chaos, but in a, also in a very beautiful way. And I think we did manage to have that responsibility to a very small group, and then they've created these really close relationships with that small group. But it has also been, because we are Jamaicans living in the US, and also it's been a year that's also been really fraught. And so it's given me some space to have those conversations that would not have been having my kids would not have been having at school about race and all of what's happening in the US, but also having me, I am so used to just escaping to Jamaica twice a year. That is what I count on. It's like the US is a hard place to be, and I take my Black girls out and we drop into Jamaica twice a year, and they have that around them. And instead, last summer, we spent a summer in the face of the marches around George Floyd's murder, and having to answer those questions for my 5-year-old, when I'm like, well, I grew up in a majority Black space, and yes, there is colorism and there's racism, but I experienced it quite differently. And so I think maybe this is a question, maybe specifically for Staceyann, as someone who's grown up in Jamaica, and then having to kind of translate that experience, translate your experience to help Zuri manage her own, and then also what it's been like now moving back, because I also think about the what would it be for us to live in Jamaica? But I'm also like, I want to raise these free Black girls, but I also had slip checks at school and I know they're not gone. So what does that transition look like in a practical sense? And I know that's a lot, like I started one place and went all the way to the other, but yeah.
I think it's a valid question, and certainly like in keeping with what I struggle with now. I think the world, you know, I mean, they say, you know, you have to choose your poison because every cup comes with it. And I think that if you have the freedom, then I think periods might be good, which is what I'm thinking. A year and a half might be good here. If you can figure out a way to set it up. I don't know if you have parents here. I don't have you know, a family home that I can drop into without consideration. I have friends who will allow me to stay, which is one of the only reasons that I can be here and still pay my mortgage at home in New York. But there are spaces here, you know, I mean, just like there are spaces, you know, my kid goes to a predominantly white school in America, and then we have to like have like a heavy at home race, you know, massaging, talking, you know, unpacking at home. Whereas here, I think her Blackness will be affirmed and lifted up and celebrated, but then we have to unpack the gender stuff at home. And I think if you can get your kid in and out of those spaces and to keep having those conversations no matter what they are, because there is no utopia until we make it. And wherever you are, you can create it, you can make it. I think for a long time, I created like the Black lesbian Mecca in my apartment in New York City, where, you know, every Saturday night I had an open door policy where anybody who, if you heard about it, you could just arrive and just be with a bunch of Black lesbians all the time on a Saturday night. You knew there was like wine and a little bit of food for you there. I think we just have to figure out how to create safe spaces. And there are 10 people here maybe who have a home. And if you can decide that my space for as many times a month as I can, I will make it a possibility to create a space for safety, whether it's like, you know, safety around race or safety around sexuality or gender or whatever it is. I think, you know, I think you just have to choose your poison and then you walk with the antidote.
Yeah, thank you, Staceyann. And Traceyann too for your question. I'm looking at, it's 1:24 and Fikile, we have a question from Brianna. So I thought we could maybe talk a little bit about that question before we kind of close out. So I want to be respectful of all of your time. Fikile, Brianna says, do you have advice on navigating questions about George Floyd? Yesterday, and it connects with Jen's question too around kind of translating. How do we keep safe spaces when it's not safe, when we are not safe? How do we support young children feeling safe when young Black children are not safe? So Brianna says, yesterday my son had a convo about it at school and was very scared when he came home. He said he is scared that he will be shot and asked why no one is doing anything to stop racism. It's obviously a lot, but how do I explain these concepts to him or to address his fears? And she said that the teacher did talk about it, but it's something that children are feeling and experiencing. So I don't know if anybody wants to, Fikile or anybody would like to talk a little bit about that, because it's a deep question.
Yeah, that's a hard one. And so important, I think, to engage in those conversations with young children. I don't have a specific how-to, but I do believe in having really direct, honest conversations with young children around issues of anti-Blackness. One resource that I've found helpful that I use with my student, I don't know if you've heard of, it's called Woke Kindergarten. They have a wonderful way of breaking down issues like Black Lives Matter and police brutality and abolition for young children using read alouds. And I've found that their work is really great. I don't know if other people have other suggestions, but having honest, direct conversations, I think, is really important.
I concur. I mean, every conversation that has been difficult has been made easier by me being frank and not being afraid to say, I don't know. And this thing is like bigger than I am, which is why I build coalitions, which is why I have sister friends that I can kind of talk it over with. And, you know, you just tell the kid that this is a problem that existed before you, and it perhaps will exist in some form after you. And every year it gets a little better because of this superhero collective called activists all across the world. And you can become a part of it, and you can join and you can do your part. And a little part of it is that when somebody at school says that so-and-so's hair is funny, you can say, that person's hair is not funny. What's funny is that you would think her hair is funny. Like, you know, you can be a superhero, be a part of that superhero pact by standing up for someone else and standing up for yourself a little bit every single day. You don't have to make everything change today, but you do have to do your part. Think about it like a mountain of sugar that everybody has to take one grain from one end of the room, up the stairs, around the corner, and across the field. Every day, somebody's got to take a little grain. And if you find yourself able to take a little bit more than a grain, you do that. But if today all you can do is one grain, you do your very best and know that you and that secret, not so secret superhero collective of activists are busy doing the work that will and is changing the world every single day.
Yes. Thank you, Staceyann. I think maybe we will kind of wrap around that idea of superhero collectives of activism, because it is something that, you know, is all of us, takes all of us. I appreciate just being here, the space, this thinking, the fact that we are all processing this together, and it's not, it feels like, okay, we can move forward. There's something that we can do together. I'm gonna share the video of Staceyann of Zuri talking about just, it's okay, change is it's a part of growth. It is a part of growth. And so I will share that in the chat with everyone, because I think that is the superhero collective as well. Thank you all for attending our last panel in our symposium, Feminist Futures, Feminist Past, that the Center for Women and Gender Studies has organized for this month. A special thank you to Fikile, to Ania, to Staceyann for just sharing your thoughts, yourselves, your work with us in community. I'm ever thankful. We are ever thankful. Thank you for all of you who attended, and look for more events that are coming up with the center. Kristen, I don't know if you want to say anything to kind of close us all out. I appreciate all of what we've been talking about today.
I'll just say thank you. This is amazing, and you're amazing, Nana, for organizing this, and thank you all for being on the panel, and thank you to everybody for attending all the events this month. We appreciate it.
Biggest love, everybody. Thank you, Fikile. Thank you, Ania. Thank you, Nana.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank y'all, and we'll share the Google Doc with the follow-up email for everybody.